My name is Robert Callahan. I'm 63 years old. For most of my working life, my job was reading people, not their faces, not their words, but the gaps between them, the silence after a question, the small hesitation before an answer, the smile that arrives half a second too late. I spent 38 years doing that for the Canada Revenue Agency Investigations Division. I never told anyone what I actually did. It was simpler that way. I was late for Thanksgiving dinner at my son's house. Not by much. 20 minutes. Maybe. The highway out of Mississauga had been backed up near the Cloverleaf. The kind of slow crawl that gives you too much time to think. I'd almost turned around twice. My son Daniel had called that morning not to confirm the time, not to ask if I needed directions I'd driven 100 times. He called to remind me to bring the check. "Dad, just so you know, the contractor needs a deposit by Friday. If you can bring it tonight, that would be great." That was how it started. Not with warmth, with logistics. I pulled into the driveway and noticed the lights were already blazing. Every window lit up. The faint pulse of music I didn't recognize pushing through the walls. There were cars I didn't know parked along the street. His friends, I assumed. His wife's family. People I'd met once at the wedding. And never again. I came in through the side door, the one off the garage that Daniel had given me a key to years ago. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and something burnt. Nobody was in there. The living room was full. I stopped in the hallway, just short of the light. My son-in-law, my daughter, Sophie's husband, Marcus, was standing in the middle of the room with a glass of red wine raised above his head. He had that grin he always wore. The one that never quite reached his eyes. The grin of a man performing confidence because the real thing had left him years ago. "To a long weekend," Marcus was saying, loud enough to cut through the music, without the lecture circuit. A few people laughed. Sophie, my own daughter Sophie, was standing right beside him. She put her hand on his arm, not to stop him, to steady herself from laughing. "He means well," she said, which is the sentence people use when they mean the opposite. "Does he?" Marcus said. "Because the last 3 times he came over, I felt like I was filing my taxes." More laughter. "Relax. It's Thanksgiving. He'll find something to criticize over the turkey and be gone by 9. I stood in that hallway for a long moment. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. I'd spent enough years in rooms watching people reveal themselves when they thought no one important was watching. I knew what I was seeing. I just hadn't expected to see it here. I went back through the kitchen. I let myself out the side door. I sat in my car for a while with the engine off, watching the silhouettes move behind the curtains. Then I drove home. I live in the same townhouse in Burlington I bought in 1991. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a backyard with a garden my wife Patricia used to tend on weekends. She passed 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. I've kept the garden going. It's not as good as hers, but it's something to do with my hands. The house is paid off. It has been since 2009. I drive a 2017 Honda Civic with 140,000 kilometers on it. It starts every morning without complaint. I don't need it to do anything else. To Marcus, I knew exactly what I represented. The father-in-law, who lived in a townhouse in Burlington and drove a Civic, and had spent his career as, in his words, a government accountant. He'd said it at the rehearsal dinner with that particular tone men use when they want to establish a hierarchy without being obvious about it. "So you were basically an accountant for the government?" That must have been steady work. Emphasis on steady. Emphasis on, basically. I'd never corrected him. I'd learned a long time ago that the less a target knows about what you can see, the longer you can keep watching. I made tea when I got home. Earl Grey, same as always. I sat at the kitchen table with the light over the stove on and the rest of the house dark, and I thought about the phone call that had happened 3 weeks earlier. Sophie had called on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice had that particular softness to it that I'd learned to recognize over the years, the voice she used when she wanted something she already knew was unreasonable. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something. Marcus has found an investment opportunity. Real estate development, pre-construction condos in Vaughan. The projected return is incredible, like 14% annually. He's already got 3 other investors committed. I'd let her talk. The thing is, Dad, the bank wants a co-signer. Not for us, for the development company. It's a formality, really. They just need someone with clean credit and an unencumbered asset. Your house would qualify. I'd put my tea down. You're asking me to put the house up as collateral. It's not collateral. It's a co-signature. It's different. It's not different, Sophie. Her voice had cooled immediately. The softness evaporated. Marcus has worked really hard on this. He's been building something real. I thought you'd want to support us. I support you. I'm not signing over my house for a pre-construction development in Vaughan. The call had ended badly. She'd said I didn't trust Marcus. I'd said that trust was something you built over time. She'd hung up. The Thanksgiving invitation had come 4 days later. I'd understood what it was. Not an olive branch. A second approach. I sat at my kitchen table and let the full shape of it settle. Why a co-signature? Why not a direct loan, if the opportunity was so strong? Because he knew I wouldn't lend money to a project I hadn't reviewed. But a co-signature that was different. That was a piece of paper I might sign without reading the full terms, especially if I was distracted, especially if I felt guilty about a recent argument with my daughter. The part of my brain that had spent 38 years untangling financial deception was already running. I went to my office. I keep it in the second bedroom, the one that used to be Sophie's. There's a desk, a filing cabinet, a computer I keep updated, and in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, underneath a folder of old tax returns, a lockbox. Inside the lockbox, my CRA credentials expired now, but the professional designations still held, and a contact list I'd maintained since I retired. I opened it. The name I needed was third from the bottom, Gwen Tran. Gwen ran a forensic accounting consultancy out of Oakville that did work for 3 of the big Bay Street firms, and occasionally, quietly, for family law cases involving hidden assets. We'd crossed paths on a case in 2014 involving a network of shell companies in Brampton. She was better than anyone I'd worked with inside the CRA. She had access to databases I no longer did. I texted her. Thanksgiving, I know. Sorry. Need a financial profile. Personal and corporate. Name, Marcus Allen Reed. She replied in 11 minutes. It's a holiday, Robert. I know. Rate and a half. Another pause. Send me what you have on him. I'll start tonight. I went back to the kitchen. I looked at the photo on the refrigerator. Sophie at her university graduation, Patricia standing beside her, both of them laughing at something off to the left of the camera. Patricia would have been disappointed tonight. Not in Sophie. In me. For not trying harder to stay in the room. To keep the thread. She always believed you had to stay in the room. But Patricia had also been the one who taught me, without meaning to, that some people will only respect the door after you've closed it. I didn't sleep much. At 6:15 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Gwen. Robert. You sitting down? She called rather than text. I stood at the kitchen window watching the neighbor's dog cross the back fence while she talked. Marcus Reed had a credit score of 512. He had 4 active credit cards, all within a few $100s of their limits. He had a line of credit at TD that he'd been drawing down and making minimum payments on for 2 years. He had a lease, not a purchase. A lease on the black BMW 5 Series I'd seen in my son's driveway at Christmas. He had a mortgage on the house in Oakville that he and Sophie lived in. The mortgage was in both their names. It was $1.4 million at a variable rate that had climbed significantly over the past 18 months. He's overextended, I said. That's not a surprise. Here's what's a surprise, Gwen said. The development company, Vaughan Prestige Properties Incorporated. I pulled the corporate registry. It was incorporated 8 months ago. 1 director, Marcus Allen Reed. No other officers. The address is a UPS store on Rutherford Road. I set my tea down. A UPS store. A mailbox. The company has no physical address. No construction permits. No land assembly on record with the city of Vaughan. and no HST registration. It has one bank account, opened at a Scotiabank branch in Woodbridge. I got a partial picture through some connects. Nothing court-ready, but enough to see the shape of it. The account received 2 wire transfers totaling $340,000 over the past 6 months. Both wires originated from numbered companies in Belize. I was quiet. Robert. Gwen's voice was careful. This isn't a bad investment. This isn't even an overambitious developer who bit off more than he could chew. This looks like a raise. He's raising capital from investors, from co-signers, from family, and the destination of that money is not a condo development. What's it for? I don't know yet. But I can tell you that the mortgage on that house is 4 months behind. I can tell you that Sophie's name is on the Vaughn Company as a secondary contact for correspondence. And I can tell you that if the CRA or FinTrack ever looks at those Belize transfers, they're going to want to talk to everyone whose name appears on that company's paperwork. I thanked Gwen. I told her to keep going. I asked her specifically about the 3 other investors he'd mentioned, whether they were real. She called back 90 minutes later. 2 of the 3 names Marcus had given Sophie corresponded to real people, an acquaintance of his from a golf club in Halton Hills, and a man in his late 50s from Etobicoke, whose name appeared on 3 other failed investment vehicles over the past decade. The 3rd investor didn't exist. Gwen had checked every variation of the name against CRA records, corporate registries, and LinkedIn. Nothing. He'd invented a 3rd investor to make the project seem further along than it was. To create urgency. To make Sophie feel like the opportunity was closing. Like her father's hesitation was costing them something real. I drove to Oakville. I didn't go to the house. I parked 2 blocks away. On a side street I knew. From a drive-by I'd done 2 weeks earlier, when Sophie first mentioned the investment. Old habit. Know the geography before you need it. I called my former colleague Brian Seto. Brian had moved from the CRA to the RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit in 2017. We still had lunch twice a year. Brian. It's Robert. I have something. It's the day after Thanksgiving. I know. I'm sorry. I have a corporate fraud situation with FinTrack implications. Vaughn Prestige Properties Incorporated. 2 Belize-sourced wire transfers, $340,000, into a single director company with no physical presence. The director has been soliciting co-signers and investors for a development that doesn't exist. Brian was quiet for a moment. Is this personal? My daughter's name is on the company correspondence. She doesn't know what it means, but her name is there. A longer pause. Send me the company number and the director's full legal name. I'm not promising anything before Monday. I know. I just need it in the right hands. I texted him everything Gwen had sent me. Then I sat in my car and watched a man walk his dog past the end of the street. Unhurried, the dog nosing at every second leaf pile on the boulevard. Ordinary Saturday morning in Oakville. Comfortable houses. Raked lawns. Everything composed. I thought about the toast, the way Marcus had held his glass. The particular ease of a man who believes the person he's laughing at isn't in the room. I thought about Sophie's hand on his arm. I went home. I made a list. Over the next 4 days, I built the full picture the way I'd been trained to build it methodically, without assumptions, working from documents outward. Gwen sent me additional pulls each morning. I organized them in a binder, the same way I'd organized case files for 3 decades, chronologically within categories, flagged with color-coded tabs. Liabilities, corporate structure, cash flow, asset discrepancies. The BMW lease was $1,847 a month, his declared income for the previous tax year, pulled through channels I still had access to from a consulting arrangement I maintained with a small firm, was $61,000. Sales consultant for a commercial real estate company he'd been with for 14 months, down from $94,000 at his previous employer, which had let him go in a restructuring. The house in Oakville at $1.4 million on a variable mortgage at current rates was running approximately $7,200 a month in carrying costs. Property tax added another $900. Car lease, credit cards. The line of credit minimum. He was spending, at minimum, $12,000 a month in fixed costs on a $61,000 salary. The difference had to come from somewhere. The Belize transfers were part of it. The investors he'd found, including the two real ones, who between them had put in $95,000, were part of it. He was running afloat. Keep enough coming in to cover what was going out. Keep the appearance intact. Keep Sophie unaware. Keep the next ask lined up. My house. My signature. $300,000 guaranteed against a mortgage on a property I'd owned free and clear for 15 years. He wouldn't have used it to fund the Vaughn project. There was no Vaughn project. He would have used it to service the Belize debt, buy himself another 6 months of the BMW and the Oakville house and the Thanksgiving dinner with the good wine and the toast about the lecture circuit. And when the whole structure collapsed, and it would collapse, these things always collapse, Sophie's name would be on the correspondence. Sophie's name would be in the file. My signature would be on a fraudulent loan application. I understood the toast differently now. The less I was around, the fewer questions got asked. The less likely Sophie was to call me and mention something that didn't add up. If I was the difficult father-in-law who didn't trust Marcus, who made every dinner uncomfortable, who Sophie kept at arm's length to preserve the peace, then I was already managed, already neutralized. The toast wasn't contempt. It was housekeeping. On the 5th day, I called Sophie. She picked up after 4 rings. Her voice was flat in the way it gets when she's been crying and has decided to be done with it. Dad, Sophie, I need you to listen to me carefully. Not as your father. As someone who has spent his career looking at exactly what I'm about to describe. Silence. Vaughn Prestige, Properties Incorporated, was incorporated 8 months ago. It has no land, no permits, no HST number, and no address beyond a mailbox in Woodbridge. The $340,000 that's moved through its account came from numbered companies in Belize. 2 of your 3 committed investors are real. The third one doesn't exist. Your name appears on the company's correspondence, which means that when the CRA or RCMP pulls this file, and they will pull it, you will be in that file. The silence that followed was the longest I've ever heard from her. Longer than when I called to tell her about her mother. A different kind of silence. The silence of a world reorganizing itself around a new fact. How do you know this? She said finally. It wasn't really a question, because I spent 38 years at the CRA Investigations Division finding exactly this. Not processing returns, not auditing small businesses. Investigating people who built structures designed to move money and assign blame to people who weren't paying attention. Another long pause. You never told me that. No. Why? Because it was simpler. And because I didn't think I'd ever need you to know. She made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Sophie, I need to know how much you knew. I didn't. Her voice broke, then came back steadier. He told me it was legitimate. He showed me projections. There were documents. There were renderings of the building. There was a whole package. Renderings are easy to produce. Did you read the corporate filings? Did you see a land registry entry? Did you ask to speak to the other investors? Quiet. I didn't want to seem like I didn't trust him. I closed my eyes. Sophie, your name is on the correspondence for a company that received $340,000 from offshore accounts. Whether you knew what that meant or not, your name is there. That is not a small thing. She started crying then. Not the restrained kind. The real kind. The kind that's been waiting. What do I do? She said. First, you don't tell Marcus that we've spoken. Not yet. Do you understand? Yes. Second, I need you to tell me whether he has ever asked you to sign anything related to the company. Anything at all. A pause. There was one thing. A few months ago, he said it was a director's resolution, a formality. He said every company needed one on file. Where did you sign it? At the kitchen table. He just put it in front of me. I didn't read it carefully. Do you have a copy? I don't think so. He took it with him. I wrote that down. Sophie, here is what's going to happen. I've already been in contact with someone at the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. I'm going to send him the full file. What happens after that is not in my hands. But if you go to them first, if you call and say you want to cooperate, that you were misled, that you have information that matters enormously, the law treats willing witnesses very differently than it treats people who wait until they're named. Will I be charged? I don't know. I'm not going to lie to you. Your name is in this. But cooperation changes things. I've watched it change things for 38 years. She was quiet again. Then, why didn't you just come inside on Thanksgiving? Why did you leave? I thought about that. Because I needed to see it clearly. I couldn't see it clearly from inside the room. She called Marcus's name then, on the other end of the line, testing whether he was nearby. Then, quietly, he's in the garage. Dad, he came home 2 nights ago and told me the Vaughn project was being restructured, that there were delays. He said we might need to put the house on the market. He's been on his phone constantly. He could feel it, the way they always feel it, right before. The structure starting to give. Sophie, don't say anything to him tonight. Call the number I'm going to text you. It's a lawyer I trust. Call her first thing Monday morning. Tell her I sent you. I texted her the number. Then I sat in my kitchen for a very long time. I thought about Patricia, the way she used to sit at the table in the garden on September evenings, a book open in her lap, not always reading, just being outside. She had loved Sophie with a completeness I always admired and could never quite replicate. My love had conditions. Hers didn't. I'd always thought that was the better way to love someone. I wasn't sure anymore. I called Marcus directly that night. He answered on the second ring. Guarded. He'd been waiting for something, though he didn't know what shape it would take. Robert. He almost never called me Robert. Usually it was some version of a deflection, a hey, or a so, or just launching straight into whatever he wanted to say. Robert meant he was adjusting. Marcus, I want to talk to you about Vaughn Prestige Properties Incorporated. Dead air. I want to talk to you about the $340,000 from the Belize accounts. I want to talk to you about the director's resolution Sophie signed without reading. I want to talk to you about the land that doesn't exist, the third investor who doesn't exist, and the mortgage that's 4 months in arrears. Nothing. You thought I was a government accountant, I said. You've been thinking that since the rehearsal dinner. It made things simpler for you, I imagine. A retired bureaucrat who processed files and collected a pension, not someone you needed to worry about. Robert, I don't know what you think you. For 38 years, Marcus, I investigated financial fraud for the CRA's Special Investigations Division. I've sent 41 people to federal court. I understand offshore structures, nominee directors, capital raises that function as advance fee fraud, and the specific way that people like you assign paper liability to people like my daughter when everything comes apart. His breathing had changed. The RCMP Financial Crimes Unit has my file. They have the corporate registry pulls, the banking records, the wire transfer documentation, and the connection to your Belize counterparties. What they don't have yet, what could make an enormous difference for Sophie, is a full account from someone with direct knowledge of the structure. That offer expires Monday morning when her lawyer makes contact. Sophie has a lawyer? She does now. Silence. I could hear traffic behind him. He was in his car. You can't prove I intended to defraud anyone, he said. His voice had gone thin. These are legitimate business transactions. The project encountered financing delays. Marcus. I spent 38 years proving intent from documents. Intent lives in the structure, not the story. The story is what people tell investigators. The structure is what I read. He tried 2 more angles. Neither one landed. His voice kept losing altitude. Then he said, "What do you want?" "I don't want anything. I want Sophie out of your structure. I want her name off every document she didn't understand when she signed it, to the extent that's still possible. And I want you to understand that the version of this story where you disappear to start over somewhere has already been closed. You reported me." "Yes." A long pause. "You're her father. Doesn't that matter? I thought about that for a moment. About the toast. About Sophie's hand on his arm. About the sound she'd made on the phone when she finally understood. Being her father, I said, is exactly why I reported you. I hung up. He was stopped at the Pearson border crossing 11 days later. The BMW was impounded. The Oakville house went under a court-issued restraining order while the asset tracing proceeded. The two real investors were notified. The Belize connection took longer to unravel, but that was now someone else's work to do. Sophie called me from the driveway of the Oakville house the night the locks were changed as part of the property restraint. She didn't cry this time. Her voice was flat and tired, in the way that's actually stronger than most people's composed voice. I should have called you 3 months ago, she said. Yes, I knew something was wrong. I kept not asking. I know. Mom would have pushed me to ask. Yes, I said. She would have. A pause. I got a meeting with the Crown Prosecutor's office on Thursday. They want a proffer. The lawyer says if I'm fully cooperative, it's likely a conditional discharge. No record. That's good, Sophie. I don't have anywhere to stay. The house is under order and I can't. I don't want to ask. The second bedroom is empty, I said. It has been for a long time. She was quiet for a moment. The garden looks good this year. I noticed when I drove by last week. It's not as good as your mother's. It's pretty close, she said. She came that weekend with 2 bags and a box of kitchen things. I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table in the light above the stove with the rest of the house quiet around us, and I told her for the first time what I had actually done for 38 years. She listened to all of it. This is something I learned a long time ago. Working through rooms full of documents and numbers and careful lies. The people who get away with things never get away with them because they're smarter. They get away because the people around them decide it's easier not to look. They survive on the willingness of everyone nearby to keep the surface smooth. The moment someone decides to really look, without needing the answer to be comfortable, the whole thing starts to come apart. I wasn't angry at Sophie. Not really. I understood exactly what she had decided not to look at, and why, and how reasonable that decision had felt at the time. Reasonable decisions made in the interest of peace are still decisions. She would carry that. She already knew it. But she was here, in the second bedroom, looking for work and meeting with lawyers and calling me every morning to ask if I wanted anything from the grocery store. Marcus had made one mistake that people like him always make. He looked at a quiet man with a modest house and a 20-year-old car and saw something that could be used. He saw a background. He didn't see a career. He forgot that the most dangerous investigators are always the ones who never needed you to know they were watching.